One of the things that the church has always had to struggle with is the kind of thing Moses was dealing with in our first passage today. The people were engaged in what might be described as humanity's number one sport. It's the grumbling that comes when things aren't going exactly the way you want them to go. And it tends to be the sort of thing that stays in the background. It festers for a while before it finally comes out. And the problem with that is that when you do it, it's like having a sliver that gets into, say, your thumb. Let's make it even a little bit more fun, since I've been through this. It's right down here, close to this joint. What happens if you don't get that sliver out of there? It begins to fester. It becomes tender. It makes this joint hard to use. And until you finally get down in there and get that out, it's not going to heal. It's just going to continue to get worse. When we do what the Israelites were doing, grumbling around in the background, we never can get to the source of what the problem is. That can only be dealt with when you pick that problem up and set it right out in plain sight. No other person should ever be so intimidating to you that you won't say something to them if there's a problem. The people, the whole time that the Hebrews were moving from Exodus to entering, and well, they're still involved in that, just like we are. They have been grumbling about what God is doing in their lives. They grumbled about Moses. They confronted him time and again. We don't have bread. God gave them bread. We don't have meat. God gave them meat. Now they come to a place, they've been moving water hole to water hole, and suddenly they come to a place and set up camp and realize they don't have any water. And rather than saying to all of their leaders, let's go on till we can find water, they come and confront Moses and say, why did you bring us out here to die? No leader does that. They lead for the good of the people. What they say, the way they lead, the places they go, it's always to try to help people to become more than they are now. That is, if they're a true leader. And Moses shows that he was. So they come to him and say, we need water to drink and we need it now. And God turns around. First of all, he gets a little short with them and says, why are you grumbling at me? I'm just God's mouthpiece. But then he turns to God and shows that he's just as human as they are. What am I supposed to do with these people? All they do is grumble. They grumble at me, they test you. What am I supposed to do? And God understands the problem and says, look, you go ahead and go, but pick out some leaders, some of the elders to go with you. And you go to Horeb, and I'll be standing on a rock there. When you get there, you strike that rock with your rod, the same one that you hit the Nile with, which created some of the plagues. And when you strike the rock, water will come gushing out, and they'll be able to get their drink. And it will cement your role as the one who carries my authority, as well as my caring for them. It didn't do that for most of them. They continued that. It's a problem that we need to deal with and become more willing to talk with one another and to say, I'm having this problem with you. Or if it's truly a problem with what's going on organizationally, to say, I think we need to change some things that we're doing as a church. then we can talk about those things. We can bring them to a point of resolution. We can't do it as long as they stay at that stage that caused Moses to name that place quarreling and testing. The second passage, it gets to be a little bit more fun. Jesus is moving from the south to the north, and the usual pattern would be that the Jews would cut to the west far enough to get around Samaria and then cut back to the east to get into Galilee. But the direct route is to simply march through Samaria. And that's the route that Jesus takes. Why? Well, maybe just so this situation can come up. One commentator said the motivation for going through Samaria may have been theological more than anything else. It was time for the Samaritans to understand that the love of God that they had seen apparently lavished on Judah, on the Jews, was for them as well. And about midday, Jesus comes to this village. He's tired, so he sits down by the well. That's not a big thing, but what transpires thereafter is the disciples go to get lunch. There's a woman who comes out. The fact that she is coming at noon or at midday to draw water shows just how far out on the margins of the society that village is. Because the normal practice is you either go in the morning before it gets hot, or you go in the evening after the heat has left. She doesn't do that because she doesn't have a good reputation in the village. And if she came at either of those times, she would have to listen to the women as they talked about her. And you can imagine the kinds of things that would have been said. So in the heat of the day, she comes out to draw water. And Jesus shocks her. As she comes up, he says, "Can you give me a drink of water?" And her first reaction is to say, "Wait a minute. You're a Jew. Not only are you a Jew, but the way that you're looking and the way that you're acting, I'm guessing you're a rabbi. And I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you talking to me?" That completely breaks the social understanding of how relationships should go on. And Jesus says, if you knew who's talking to you, you'd be asking me for a drink. You'd want what I could offer you. She's still having the same problem Nicodemus was having last week. She's thinking literally, while Jesus is talking metaphorically. So she says, "You don't even have a bucket. How are you going to get water? This is a deep well. You have to have something that you can attach to the rope and drop down to draw water. How are you going to give me water to drink?" And so Jesus describes the fact that what he offers is a life that wells up from inside of you, that gives you strength and courage to go on. And when she hears that, still thinking literally, she says, "Give me this water so I don't have to get thirsty and come out here for water anymore. Then I can avoid the kind of thing that I've been dealing with all the time. The scorn that comes to me, the suspicion, the hate. In the middle of these times when they have to come to a well, she wants a faucet in her kitchen so that she never has to put up with people again. She could stay in her house and not have to put up with them." And when the disciples return and start to talk with Jesus, She picks up on their attitude. But either out of confusion for what Jesus has said, or as some translations read, with a sense of excitement about what Jesus has told her, she leaves her water pot, which would be a very valuable thing at that time. And she runs back to the village, and she starts telling everybody as she comes into the village that she's met a man that knows everything about her, everything she's done. And then she asks the question, could he be the Messiah? Could he be the chosen one? And they all decide they're going to go find out for themselves. And they're so entranced by what Jesus has to say to them. And I think the fact that a Jew is telling them that they have a right to be a part of what God plans to do, that they ask him to stay for an additional 2 days. And it sounds like the majority of the village decided through that stay and through the witness of the woman that they were going to follow Jesus. We might ask ourselves, well, okay, what does that mean for us? You have that living water. Whether you recognize it or not, you do. If you follow Jesus, you have it. It isn't about physical thirst. It's about the thirst you have in your heart, in your spirit. But you have to tap into it. You have to open yourself to it. Mount Gerizim in Samaria is not the place where God needs to be worshiped. The temple in Jerusalem is not the place where God needs to be worshiped. This building is not the place where God needs to be worshiped. That needs to happen right here. And it has to come from the very core of who you are. And it needs to be filled with adoration. Because when that is the way that you are connecting, then you become living water for others. And you find out that you can be the one that breaks all those social norms that tells you who you can and can't talk to, who is and who is not acceptable. Once again, we see Jesus associating with someone from, quote, the wrong side of the tracks. How many times do we need to see those visions before we understand? It's okay for you to live and work among the acceptable. But when it comes to sharing the faith, when it comes to considering how to grow the church, we need to be among questionable people of town, of the community, sharing with them what we find when we come to worship God. What are the things that cause us to grumble? Where are the people that we really don't want anything at all to do with? Have we experienced the living water? Amen.